hearing from the public, the applicant will be allowed to present their case, and the board members shall ask questions for comment. Does any member of the board have any conflict of interest in this case?
No.
No. Okay. Public hearing with notice for this application was posted at the town hall, sent to a certified list of parties of interest, and was published in the town common on August 1st, 2018, and August 8th, 2018, and reads as follows. Case number 19.01. A public hearing will be held at the Town Hall Annex 39 Central Street on Thursday, August 16th, 2018, at 7:10 p.m. to act on an application received July 23rd, 2018, from Rocco and Lucy Petulio. The applicant is seeking a special permit for the requirements of the Raleigh zoning bylaw, section 6611. For an in-law apartment and garage. The property is located at 137 Hillside Street in the outlying district and is shown on the Assessors Map 19, Lot 111. At the public hearing, members of the public may ask questions and present evidence that support either approval or denial of this petition. I would ask that when you speak, you direct the chair. Questions through the chair. The application is as follows. The applicant is Rocco C. Petulio Jr. and Lucy F. Petulio, 137 Hillside Street, Raleigh, Mass. 01969. We're asking for a special permit under the requirements of section 6611 of the Raleigh Protective Zoning Bylaw. It's Assessors Map 19, lot number 1-11. If they are in the outlying district. District municipal water supply. The deed is recorded in Essex Registry of Deeds, book number 31001, page 390. As a previous variance or special permit or other zoning relief been ever requested, the answer is no. Description of work is construction in addition, which will include a garage and accessory in-law apartment. The reason for this application is a special permit is required for accessory in-law apartment per section 6611 of the zoning bylaw. And it is signed by Lucy and Rocco, correct?
No, I have.
You do?
I have.
Ours is blank.
I know.
Okay.
Since all the abutters themselves. Fee of $250. Is they receive. letters from planning board. Oh, that's what we have to do. That's from the fire department. There's only comment is that carbon monoxide allowed to be brought up to date. And from the health department, there's an existing 4-bedroom, 8-room house based on the septic system and building information on the file. Additional information regarding total number of bedrooms, floor plans, and status of the attic and basement will be required prior to signing the building permit. Okay. That was learned from the selectmen, which basically states,
Did you see the note from Ken Ward? He commented.
It's right after the planning board,
I think it's the first note.
but it's after the planning board vote.
let's see. Oh, I missed it.
There it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I reviewed the application and drawings that no calls for the board approving the new apartment. The apartment, 700 square feet of living area, and garage meets setback. And it's not a living area. Okay.
Good evening. For the record, John Moran from the Moran Cameron Group. We're here tonight representing Rocco and Lucy Tullio for a special permit application for their property located at 138 Hillside Street. And the plan that you see before you was the site plan that was submitted with the application. Hillside is on the left-hand side of the page, or the northerly side of the property. What you see in purple is the actual outside perimeter. The house is approximately 100 feet back from the front lot line. So we're here tonight proposing an accessory in-law apartment. A special permit's required under your zoning bylaw for that use. The existing structure is located in the outlying district, so it is an allowed use, the accessory apartment. As stated in the application, there's a garage that would be located at the back side of the existing dwelling. The in-law apartment would be beyond that. So the in-law apartment itself is 700 square feet, and you'd have a one-bay garage, approximately 280 square feet. Right now, the way the house is set up, this is a garage under design. So the garage itself is roughly the same elevation as the basement. So the in-law apartment is going to be set roughly around about a half foot or a step up above the basement floor. The garage would be set at the same elevation as the existing garage. So right now at the back of the existing structure, there's a screen porch that's at first floor level. So it's actually elevated above the ground because it's a walkout along that back. And there's a deck that's also located adjacent to that covered porch. What's going to happen is when they go to build this addition, the covered porch is going to stay because it's a pretty major structure. The deck will be raised. A new deck will be constructed on top of the proposed addition right at the same elevation. And again, as I mentioned, the covered porch stays. The actual addition would be underneath that covered porch. Just running through the regulations, as I stated earlier, the house is located in the outlying district, so accessory apartment is allowed. The size of the accessory apartment is 700 square feet proposed, which is allowed as the maximum size under the zoning bylaw. The utilities for the apartment are all going to be serviced through the existing structure, so you won't have additional utilities, which isn't allowed. The apartment shall not be held in separate ownership, so the whole structure will remain under the same ownership, which is the Tutulios. Mrs. DiTullio's parents will be living in the in-law apartment, so John and Carol Caputo will be living, so they're blood relatives, so that complies with the zoning bylaw. We will record the special permit, obviously, and then the covenant. We'll put together a recording that is acceptable to the board. I may actually call the board's office and see if there's any recent ones to just get an example of what they've seen in the past and what they like. So if the board is inclined to issue a special permit, we'll provide that documentation. Occupancy of the apartment shall be limited to a maximum of 2 persons. As I stated, Mrs. DiTullio's parents will be living there, so there's 2 people. And the dwelling unit shall only contain, so in here before, 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. Yes, I thought that's in here.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and by the floor plan that was submitted, you can see that it's, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. We do have wetland resource areas out on the property. They're located in the back of the lot. We have filed with conservation. I actually met with Brent today on a site walk. We're meeting with the Concom next week. I don't foresee any major issues with the Conservation Commission for the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has.
This apartment is going to be a basement apartment, basically?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
But the whole backside of it is actually open, so it's above ground. So even though technically it's at the basement level, you'll have windows all along that backside that are open.
And an egress? Can I ask a question? Is there an egress out the back?
I could talk to the architect.
Looks like it's going into the garage.
Right now,
Just one?
they had access going into the main dwelling, and then you've got access going into the garage. If they're required to have access coming out the back, they can do that, because again, the existing grade at the back of the structure is at the level of that first floor. So it'd be like 1 step down out of the apartment down onto the ground.
Are these the only drawings
Yeah.
we have?
Yeah, unfortunately, the clients don't have a whole lot of money, so they're trying to minimize costs. And obviously, they're going to need to put together better building plans for the building inspector. But before spending that kind of money, they wanted to see if they could get the special permit first. So what they did is they actually had the builder, Alan Smallman, who's going to be doing the construction, put together the floor plan that the architect will use to prepare the construction drawings.
It's John?
Yes.
Clarify something for me on the drawing.
Yep.
On the plot plan provided, you mentioned the covered porch and deck, and the covered porch is going to remain because structurally it's not worth tearing down. When I hear it.
Exactly.
Okay. The deck, as pictured, is going to be removed, and that's the area where the actual covered garage is going to be, which is below ground, which is below street level. It's sort of.
Yeah, the garage is kind of, it's in front of that deck and underneath it. But if you look at it, from a cross section,
Do you have a cross-section in the drawing?
unfortunately, I don't.
Wait for that and make it. Okay, I agree with you.
I'd like to have it though.
So from a cross-section standpoint, here's the existing dwelling.
Yeah.
It's a garage under, so you're on grade right here. The first floor elevation is here, so you've got that screen porch that's up here, and the deck is at that same level as the screen porch. The proposed addition is underneath all of this above. So the screen porch is going to stay. They're going to build the addition underneath it. They're going to have to support the screen porch when they go to put the frost walls in for
Oh, I got it.
the addition. So the whole thing is tucked underneath everything that's on the first floor.
Now, this has got to be a kitchen, so this is a kitchen area
Correct.
that is, and that's under what you're talking about.
Yep.
basically.
So
Okay.
the whole deck will remain, the screen and the rest of the deck?
Well, they're gonna take the deck
No,
off
just
and
the
then put
screen.
it back in the exact same spot when
Yeah.
you're done.
Oh, for building
Yeah.
purposes.
Right.
Yeah, because the deck itself,
In the way.
it's easy to take it down
Yeah.
and just get it out of the way, whereas the covered porch is a lot more
Yeah.
work. So they're gonna leave that and then just dismantle the deck and then just build the deck right on top of the proposed addition.
Okay, that clarifies. The absence of any elevation
Yes.
drawings make it difficult to understand exactly where the structure is going to be and assess the height limitations, but those obviously aren't that in effect here.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
I think that answers the question that the planning board had about whether it be a one or two story.
Yeah, it's single.
Okay, let's go through the bylaw and check off everything, make sure that, okay. Accessory in-law apartment. Board of Appeals may issue a special permit authorizing an accessory in-law apartment within or as an attached addition to a single-family dwelling, subject to the conditions and requirements specified in this section. Any special permit issued under this section shall be consistent with the intent of this section, which is to provide an alternative housing option to the family members and individuals who own and occupy single-family dwellings in the town of Raleigh while maintaining the appearance and character of the town's single-family neighborhoods. The intent of this section is not to create new rental units in town or to provide owners of single-family dwellings with an opportunity to earn rental income. General requirements. Principal dwelling must be located in the central district, residential district, the outlying district, or the coastal conservation district, and it is in the outlying district. Except as provided under 6623, the apartment shall be a complete housekeeping unit that functions as a separate unit from the principal dwelling. The apartment shall contain a kitchen and shall not have more than one bedroom or one bathroom. The floor area of the apartment must not exceed 700 square feet, except that the board may waive this limitation for the application involving the unit for which a special permit was issued under section 66 prior to February 8, 2012. But only if the board area of such unit has increased since the date of such special permit. Only one apartment is allowed per principal dwelling. The stairway to the apartment located above the first floor of the building shall be considered within the exterior walls of the building. The principal dwelling of the apartment shall be served by the same driveway. That is so. Unless the apartment shall be extensions of the existing utilities and serve principal dwelling, no new utility service may be installed for use in the apartment. And that is correct, it's going to have its own.
It's gonna service through the
It's gonna be
existing
serviced.
structure.
It's going to be serviced from the main house.
Yes.
Ownership and use requirements. The apartment shall not be held in separate ownership from the principal dwelling and the common unit for ownership otherwise stated in the values. Special permit shall be issued to the record owner of the lot and shall specify that one or more of the record owners, if the title is held by a natural person or for the special permit is a declaration of covenant in a form approved by the zoning board of appeals and the registry of deeds. The declaration shall be in favor of the town and shall include the following statement. The special permit for an accessory in-law apartment shall terminate upon the transfer of ownership of the subject points, or upon the undersigned determination is an early use of the subject premises in the primary residence. Proof of recording of a special permit and the declaration shall be provided to the building inspector and the board before a building and occupancy permit may be issued for the property. Occupancy, the apartment shall be limited to a maximum of 2 persons. At least one of the occupants of the principal dwelling and one of the occupants of the apartment must be related by blood marriage. Okay, where's the covenants? Okay. I can see all the requirements have been met. Okay? So,
Make a motion that we accept it as presented.
Do you want to ask if there's anybody else that wants to be heard?
Anyone else want to ask any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Joseph Donnelly, I'm an abutter to this property. Could you just clarify, they are asking for no special exemptions from the bylaws, is that true?
Yeah.
More or less. They're willing to construct the addition subject to the conditions stated in the bylaw.
Okay. Can I see the plan? I have not seen the plan.
Yep.
Sure.
Will the structure look different from the street?
No, the majority of the addition is tucked behind the existing dwelling.
Okay,
You will have about 10 feet that comes up the back side, but again, the existing structure is 100 feet back, so it should blend in with that back side of the property. But, 90% of the proposed addition is at first floor level behind the existing dwelling.
okay, and instead of instead of a 2-car garage, they will now have a 3-car garage, is that correct?
Correct.
And is that the change to the driveway that is being requested?
Yes.
That it be
The
extended
addition.
longer?
Yep, we're adding additional pavement to that door.
And does that affect, the river runs back here, right? So are we
Yes.
creating more runoff from
Yep.
this? And is that why you have to go in front of the Conservation Commission?
One of the reasons we have to go in front of the commission is because of the wetlands here, and we're
Yep.
within the buffer zones.
Yep.
And one of the criteria under that is when we design this, we have to mitigate that additional runoff generated by not only the driveway, but the addition itself.
And how are you mitigating that?
Right now, there's an existing drainage pond that was built right here when this house was built.
Yep.
We're actually enlarging that pond. There's a Conservation Commission meeting next Tuesday night. If you're an abutter, you should have gotten notification
I
of
did.
that meeting as well.
Yep.
That'll probably come up during that discussion as well.
Okay.
But that's how we mitigated the runoff, was through that.
Okay. And they will put a covenant on the deed that this will not become a rental unit, correct?
Whatever's required by the zoning bylaw.
That's a standard.
And that's one of the
That's a
requirements.
standard requirement.
Okay. All right.
Plus an element of an in-law apartment by the bylaw is that in the event the property changes hands, the in-law apartment option goes away.
Okay.
It has to be reapplied for again. It's not indeterminate that it stays.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? We have a motion before the board. The motion made by Dave and seconded by,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get that covenant in, check with Lisa on the covenant. okay?
Yes.
So we have it before next month, so when they sign the decision, we'll have that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, John.
Before we get into the next, why don't we take care of this, Marion Lane withdrawal? We have a letter from Mr. DeCoulis stating kindly cancel our meeting for tonight, continue to your next meeting, September 27, 2018. We are on the Conservation Commission's agenda for the next meeting on August 21st. So is there a motion to accept this for continuance till September 27th?
So moved.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Time, 7:30. Good evening. Good to see you all new people here for a hearing. That doesn't happen very often. Oh,
Mr. Chairman, you might want to mention there's seating down front.
Okay, I will read the procedures and then we'll get started. This is case number 1902. The public hearing for case number 1902 for an application received from Frank and Shirley Todd seeking a special permit is now open. The public hearing will proceed in an orderly fashion, and I ask for cooperation in the following procedure. Anyone present will be given an opportunity to be heard, and after the application is presented and the board members have questions, this hearing is being videoed and audio taped. Therefore, when you address the board, begin by stating your name and address. Speak slowly, audibly, and clearly. Only one person will speak at a time. The purpose of the hearing is for the board to hear and consider the pertinent facts relating to the application and to approve the conditions or deny. Before hearing from the public, the application, the applicant will be allowed to present their case, and then the board members will ask questions or comments. This time, is any member of this board in conflict of interest? No.
No.
Public notice for this application is posted in the town hall sent to a certified list of parties in interest and was published in the town common on August 1st, 2018, and August 8th, 2018, and reads as follows. Case number 19.02. A public hearing will be held at the Town Hall Annex, 39 Central Street on Thursday, August 16th, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. to act on an application received July 23rd, 2018 from Frank and Shirley Todd, trustees of Todd's Riverview Farm Trust. They're seeking a special permit from the requirements of the Raleigh Protected Zoning Bylaw, sections 5.2 and 7.6, for constructing a second interior floor and existing hay barn for events at the trailer to an applicant's restaurant use. The property is located at 275 Main Street in the Beltline District and is shown on the Census Map 26, Block 25 and Block 3. At the public hearing, members of the public may ask questions and present evidence that supports either the approval or denial of this petition. Application is as follows. Applicant Shirley Todd and Frank P. Todd as trustees of the Todd Riverview Farm Trust at 643 Main Street, Reading, Mass. Application hereby made for determination and finding of pre-existing restaurant and/or for a special permit from the requirements of section 5.2 and 7.6 of the Raleigh Protected Zoning Bylaw. Shown on the Assessors Map 26, Block 25, Lot 3. In the outlying district. Deed is recorded in Essex Registry of Deeds, book number 27245, page 174. And there's been no special permit issued prior previously. Description of proposed work is the applicant proposes to construct interior floor and existing playground for events temperature to applicant's restaurant use. The reasons for this application's applicant's restaurant use is a pre-existing non-conforming use. Shirley G. Todd, Frank Todd, section dated 7/19/18. Okay. We have several letters here. And we have one from the planning board, and one from the health department. And we have one from the fire department. not from law offices. Okay, all right. At this time, I'm going to let attorney speak.
Thank you. Members of the board and fellow citizens of Raleigh, my name is Chris Latham, 701 Newburyport Turnpike, Raleigh, Massachusetts. I'm here on behalf of the Todd family relative to the application before you as to Todd Farm, 275 Main Street. The Todds are before this board seeking a determination and special permit in order to preserve the character and rural appearance of the historic 1790 farmhouse and 1874 barn by providing the 5-acre property with financial viability in the face of encroaching suburbia and the pressure of residential development. Todds would like to continue to operate at the property as opposed to developing the property for residential use. Since 1972, a restaurant food establishment has been operating at the property, cooking to order hamburgers, hot dogs, eggs, sausages, shrimp, in some instances lobster rolls for individual customers. I expect that some members of the board, and many members of the public here tonight, could testify to having eaten there or observed people eating there, or have seen basically food consumption over the years at the property. For the board's reference, in support of this application, I have 8 original affidavits of customers and copies of town records as to pre-existing use of the property as a restaurant. In 1978, the town amended the bylaws prohibiting restaurants in the outlying district. The restaurant existed on the property at that time and is still there. For the board's reference, the property, for the board's reference in support of this application, I also am going to provide you with copies of the town's 1977 zoning map, which denotes the property and the structures as basically being in the outlying district, which we do not dispute. The cover sheet of the relevant portions of the town's 1973 zoning bylaw, noting that such restaurant use was then allowed in the outlying district. A document entitled, quote, 1978 Proposed Amendments to the Zoning Bylaw, Town of Raleigh, Massachusetts, which notes the then change in the bylaws that made the restaurant use a pre-existing non-conforming use. As well as I'm going to provide a cover sheet of the town's warrant from May 1st, 1978, and relevant portions of said warrant, which notes that the approval of the bylaw amendment. So consistent with section 5.2 of the bylaws, the Todds seek a special permit to expand the non-conforming restaurant use by slightly less than 25% via an extension of the second floor inside the existing hay barn, installing 2 sets of stairs, interior stairs, to said second floor, and installing an interior elevator to said second floor. The proposed alterations would be used for special, on-demand, for higher functions pertinent to restaurant use, such as catered events, social gatherings, weddings, showers, and business conferences, etc. The proposed alterations would total 2,320 square feet and not alter the exterior appearance of the barn and would not increase the size of the barn. The footprint would remain the same. Historically, people have purchased, consumed food, and walked over the 5-acre property, as well as the 4,545 square feet farmhouse and the 4,896 square foot cow barn in L, which structures were constructed prior to 1978 zoning amendment and have been used for such non-conforming use over the years. The 4,545 square feet farmhouse and the 4,896 square foot cow barn in L total 9,436 square feet, of which the proposed 2,320 square feet alteration is slightly less than 25%. And for the board's reference, as you probably already saw, the 25% calculations that I just referenced are depicted on the last page of the architectural renderings that were submitted to the application. It is proposed that no functions would be held during any flea market day. They would only be conducted, we would propose, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. The Todd family would like to keep the existing rustic appearance of the grounds and its pervious surface, and thus do not propose any paving or exterior lighting unless the board deems it necessary. The Todds propose to use the existing parking scheme, which has provided ample access to the barn for safety equipment and safety personnel over the years, as well as keep the one-way means of egress and traffic direction around the barn, which is counterclockwise. with traffic entering on the south side of the 1A entrance and exiting around the barn coming out on the north side of 1A. The TODS will work with the Board of Health and Building Department and Public Safety, including as to the well that's noted in the Board of Health letter, and any necessary upgrades they think are appropriate relative to food preparation and refrigeration, any required upgrades that they deem necessary in regards to the septic system, and tying into town water for the sprinkler system that is the proposed fire suppression system for the cattle and hay barn. The TODS believe that the requested special permit and alterations will benefit the town, the zoning district, and obviously the property by providing economic viability to the property, providing relief from the pressure to construct more residential housing, maintaining the character and natural environment of the town, maintaining the compatibility of the existing structures on the property with the character, scale, and design of the existing buildings and structures in the neighborhood, assisting in preserving historic structures and appearance of the property both economically and physically, improving both public health, safety via the upgrades we talked about, refrigeration, food preparation, water supply, septic, and installation of the sprinkler system for fire suppression in the cattle barn, providing the citizens of Raleigh with a public gathering location, preserving, frankly, open space, and not increasing impervious surface. And I repeat, not increasing impervious surface, and thus not negatively impacting stormwater drainage. As a result of the limited scope of the TODS proposal, we really don't frankly anticipate any negative impacts to any anticipated abutting properties nor the town or its services. We thus believe that the proposed extension or alteration will not be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming use to the neighborhood. We therefore request the board issue the TODS special permit. Unless the board has any specific concerns, we request a waiver of any information or materials that you think is not depicted or is missing from the application of the plans. And before I turn the show over to Architect David Jaquith, I'll provide you with copies of that documentation if I may approach the board. So these are the original affidavits, Mr. Chairman, along with copies of the zoning map and the references to the historic bylaw and the warrant. And those are town records relative to the historic use of the restaurant and food establishment. Members of the board, I also have copies of the affidavits if you would like them as well. And I also have copies of the historic portions of the bylaw for the, sorry. And finally, I have copies of the historic records of the restaurant. Being said, if I could turn it over to Architect David Jaquith to discuss the interior plans.
Here's someplace. I don't work from notes, so I just talk. And I didn't draw the floor plans either. Frank Todd actually drew these. He's been a landscape architect for 150 years or something like that. And this building is made up of a hay barn, which you probably, all of you have probably been in, and there's no hay left in it. It's been used recently as flea market stalls on the ground floor. There are, on a second floor presently, the two side bays have flooring in it where the hay was stored, and that's where we want to renovate. We need to add a kitchen, we need to add public toilets, handicap toilets, etc. At present, the cattle barn number 1, which is off to the right, has been totally restored and has been used for the past few years as, I wouldn't call it flea market, they're little craft shops similar to Salt Marsh and King Pony. very well presented. And we just finished, and I was the architect for it, as an extension to that. Frank's called it Cattle Barn number 2, although no cattle have ever been in it. And that is now open. It's beautiful, really. I'm not talking about myself, it just happened. So the place where we're working is in the second floor of the barn. It's a big volume, it's a way to continue to restore the barn. There are some things that are missing on the barn. The cupola right now is down to here. The cupola is missing. Love to put it back. I don't think I'm putting it back in the same form as what it originally was. It was a beautiful one up in Newbury, near the common, that got ripped down, and I would love to have a cupola like that. But there has been exterior work on the main barn, and this has all been restored in the building behind us, brand new. So this is where we want to do the use, and I think we're pretty well covered it. Pretty picture of this location, and if it's sunny, it's busy out there. There's been traffic control at Route 1A, Main Street, on flea market days. There's somebody out there waving people in, stopping traffic and letting it go out. There are actually 2 flea markets that go inside there, Stars Flea Market and the one in front of the property. And it's been working quite well for a number of years. And some of these uses that we're asking for have been, I think, here all along. There's been a wedding in this field. There's been functions in the field. There's been functions in the barn. I know I've seen Frank Todd's book, and he's documented all the things that have happened in the fields and in the barn over the past, since 1972. I can't say much more about it. I'm glad to answer any questions.
This time, before I open it up for discussion, do you have any members of the board have any questions that you'd like to ask at this time?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. I'd like to hear from comments from the audience. Please state your name and address.
Mike Sabatini, 239 Main Street, direct abutter. I want to start out by reading the building inspector's letter, if you don't mind. Todd Farm has been used as an antique and flea market since I arrived in 1989. It was always grandfathered until several years ago when it created an overlay district for part of the outlying district. There is some confusion regarding the use of the property where the barn sits. It is an outlying overlay district, which is now conforming as a flea market. The other portion of the barn with no structures on it is in the central district, which allows uses through the planning board with the site plan or special permit. Todd Farm building does not have any agricultural exemptions as they have no land on 61A, nor do they grow anything. Finally, they have a food shack only to prepare food, as they've always had food vendors in the past. This, however, is not by any means a restaurant, which is not allowed in the outlying district. As it relates to the house where food in the past was prepared, the other Mrs. Todd, she prepared in her own home cookies, cakes, and pastries, and sold them to people who came in. Nothing was ever prepared in the house. In fact, there's a sink, but there's no stove or ovens, which would allow you to cook inside that house. So it's a big stretch for these people to come in here and tell you that there's been a restaurant all along. I've spoken to the Board of Health, and yes, they have a snack bar permit. And they wanted to enlarge it because they needed a little bit more space. And Frank at the Board of Health gave them the snack bar permit, and they constructed a shack to cook from. From that, they stretched it by adding a section off it, brought in grills, and now started cooking. So they went from doing a snack bar, which is generally speaking, homemade prepared goodies, cakes, cookies and whatnot, to now they're grilling, and they're serving hamburgers, hot dogs, and everything else you can imagine. And now they added tables and chairs, which goes beyond the concept of a snack bar, which is no seating. So, to the dismay of Frank, they've taken the nicety of giving the Todd family a snack bar permit, and now they're hanging Frank out to say that that constitutes a restaurant. There's no way that's a restaurant. It's a huge stretch. It further, on the application, which I'll get to, I'm dismayed by the application in that it assumes, by using the word appurtenant to a restaurant, it assumes to this board that they are in fact a restaurant before they even walk in here. And that, again, far from the case that they are a restaurant in operation. There are so many rules and regulations by the Department of Massachusetts to operate a restaurant, including all the inspections that would have to have on a regular basis to warrant that they are in fact a restaurant. Food preparation, the point A, you have to track all that food, all that hamburger and hot dogs and things that they serve there has to be tracked from the place of origin to the time it is cooked on the grill. I can't imagine that's ever been done and inspected by the Board of Health. He says it hasn't been done. You can't serve any food without knowing exactly where it comes from. That's part of having a restaurant. The inspection as a restaurant by a Board of Health, to my knowledge, has not ever been done. To have the grease traps and all the rules and regulations that go around in having a actual kitchen to be a restaurant. There is no kitchen, so you can't say that you're a restaurant if you don't have a kitchen. You have a gas grill outside. You have a gas grill in your backyard. I have a gas grill in my backyard. Does it make me a restaurant? That's what they're cooking from. So those are just the start of some of the issues. Yes, they are in an outlying district. There is no dispute there. Can't have a restaurant in an outlying district. It was just been converted in May of 2015 to the FMASOD, which is the flea market district, overlay district. It doesn't say flea market and restaurant district. It's a flea market district. That's the start of my discussion here. And anybody else wants to jump in, by all means.
Yes, ma'am, state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Dorothy Todd, and my family are abutters. And I want to state, first of all, that as far as the kitchen goes, I came, my father-in-law, Payson Todd, had asked if I would do the kitchen, so-called, in the early 70s. Now, there was no cooking there. I prepared things at home, and I had a license in my home in New Hampshire. And I transported small amounts of food, such as pies and maybe cakes or whatever I happened to have. And he had the coffee ready when I got there. And so that was the early 70s. Then I went home and we bought a bed and breakfast. And then at some point, they had others who might have done the same thing that I did. Nothing specific. But then the flea market emerged when a woman asked my father-in-law if she could put some things outdoors. And the first thing you know, others did, and the flea market became what you, well, not what you know it as today, but the beginning. So at some point, when my parents-in-law's estate was settled, and my husband was the administrator, then we had Brooke did the kitchen first, and then Barry was outdoors with his hamburgers. Barry's a nephew to all of us. And he cooked his meat, pre-cooked it at a restaurant in Newburyport. It was not raw. And then, so he sold that. And then my daughter and I went into the kitchen, and once again, it was only on Sunday cafe, we called it, as I still do on the outside. And there was no stove, so we did not prepare anything there. So I'm just stating this for the record, that it was brought in, and then 2 young men wanted to do the kitchen, and they did, and then the brother of one and his friend wanted to do it, and that took place. And then one had a serious operation, and I went back in on 24 hours, my daughter and I, on 24 hours notice, and started doing it again. But I have to state, in all honesty, that I didn't cook anything there. There was no stove. It was all prepared at home. So that's my truth on that end. And now I have a food trailer where, once again, I don't cook anything as far as, you know, in the trailer and so forth. So
Thank you.
that's, if you have any questions, we're here.
Okay. Anyone
My
else?
son and my daughter are owners also, abutters and owners of our share.
Okay. Anyone else? Any comments? Yes.
Janet Todd, 44 Ocean Boulevard, Hampton, New Hampshire. Residence and business would be 283 Main Street, Raleigh, known as Stars Todd Farm Flea Market. I have worked in the Hampton Inn Hotel, where we served breakfast, complimentary breakfast, while nothing was cooked raw. Everything was brought in frozen or prepared. We still had stringent health inspections. A 3-bay sink, one for washing, one for rinsing, and one for sanitizing. A dishwasher that had to reach a certain temperature. Things couldn't be lower than 6 inches off the floor. They couldn't be between the floor and 6 inches up. Ovens, we did have an oven, it was only for heating. And also, we had restrooms that were available to anyone in the hotel who ate there or came in for the function room. Todd Farm does not have running water restrooms that are currently available to anyone purchasing food at the snack bar. From what I hear, it's they have from what I see, it's the Jiffy John's, and from what I hear, only a limited amount of individuals are allowed into the water closet, where the water runs.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Debbie Strife, Kittery Avenue. Didn't I hear that the installation of handicapped restrooms were going to be part of the installation of the catering facility? So I would think that what they're talking about adding is a catering facility, not a restaurant open to the public, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the snack bar. And the caterers that came in and use it, won't they have their own food licenses?
Yes.
It's a valid question.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, I was referring to the fact that they were currently calling this a restaurant.
Okay.
It's a permit application.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Mike Kovalchuk, 250 Main Street. With the recent approval and start of a farm-to-table venue directly across the street from me, I believe we've got enough venues in the neighborhood for at least a short while here. And I don't think we need another one right now. I think some people will agree with me.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, Bernice Vecchione, I live at 250 Main Street. I mean, since I've been here, it's only been a snack bar over there. I mean, all I ever saw them cook was have the baked goods and donuts and coffee, that was it. Until they got the grill outside.
Anyone else?
May I read one paragraph from the Board of Health? Just one.
Okay.
The narrative provided with the application does not make it clear the purpose of the request. The application states an existing so-called restaurant at the site. The existing food permit with proof of records from the 1970s has been as a snack bar, food stand, or retail for a residential kitchen located at another site. The current existing food establishment permit is associated with an auxiliary shed with a sink and limited refrigeration. Adjacent to it is a propane grill under a canopy. The Board of Health records do not show any seating, indoor or outdoor, associated with this food permit. So again, maintaining that it's not a restaurant.
Hi. I would like to continue on that same letter. Title 5, 310, CMR 15, requires that restaurants with seating have septic systems designed for 35 gallons per day per seat with a minimum of 1,000 daily flow. Other types such as fast food have different flows. Blah, blah, blah. The next paragraph. The septic system for the barn, completed in 2013, is designed for 4,900 square feet of office retail space for a total design flow of 367.5 gallons per day. My calculations at 35 gallons per day per seat would translate into just 10 seats in a restaurant situation. That's what that's capable of. 367.5 total, and 35 per person. That looks like 10 seats max.
Septic system would be totally redesigned for the facility and the capacity.
But our point is it's proving that it's not a restaurant, because the septic system is not in place to service a restaurant. So there is no restaurant. That's the whole point, David. Your argument, you're coming in here and you're saying, or gentlemen, to the board.
Any other questions? Yes.
Shirley Todd, 303 Main Street. I would just like to make clear, we're looking to have several events. We don't want to be stuck into wedding receptions because Mike has a lovely venue for that, but we would like to have events. And we would, probably it would be catered, so we wouldn't have a sit-down where you're served from like in a restaurant, sit-down restaurant. And that's basically it. The caterer would have his own permits. And we have adequate septic right now, and we are more than willing to work with the fire department, the Board of Health, and as for the so-called little that Trevor runs, he has complied with all that the Board of Health has required, to fat traps, grease traps, whatever you call them, and everything else. Brooke has been wonderful about obeying everything that the town requires.
Okay. Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Lake.
Yes, okay.
Go ahead. Section 5.2 of the bylaw talks about expansion or prior existing non-conforming use or change. Your application does not specify whether you're seeking to expand or to change from one non-conforming use to another. You do say you'd like a determination or a finding, but a determination or a finding is not something we do in and of itself. You've got to have a context. So are you asking for an expansion of an existing use, in which case I think you would have to demonstrate you've got an existing kitchen, or are you asking for a change from one existing use to another, to a new use?
Well, the context was basically in terms of expansion, but, I mean, we could be open to a change if the board is willing to consider from that
Well,
perspective.
I want to know what you're asking for, because it seems to me that if you're asking for an expansion, you've got to prove you've got an existing kitchen or restaurant. If, on the other hand, you're not asking for an expansion but a change, so I think you've got to decide what you're asking for so that we can apply the appropriate standards to whether it's a change or an expansion.
Well, I'll have to go back to, if I may, I was gonna make a comment, and that may get us to that direction. To my knowledge, this property does not have any existing special permits whatsoever. I checked with the town clerk, and I checked with Lisa. And the flea market overlay district, which is referred to in the building inspector's letter, I believe is incorrect in how he's applied it, because this is a pre-existing non-conforming use that we're talking about. We're not talking about a new flea market. So I don't think that, the bylaw itself at 4.12.2 basically talks about a new flea market. So we're not talking in that regard about a new flea market. This is a pre-existing, the flea market itself is a pre-existing use. So the overlay district is not necessarily applicable to what we're talking about here. Likewise, to apply that would take away the rights to the pre-existing uses rights under 40A, Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A. The flea market bylaw itself also doesn't address anything in regards to food establishments. And what I submitted to the board was copies of permits that go back to 1974, including in common viculars and basically food establishment permits that the town has issued, and I would think the town would only issue those based upon inspections that have been conducted. I also don't believe that the operation of a restaurant and a flea market are independent uses. I think both of them can pre-exist, and from my perspective, I think they have. The bylaws have no definition as to what a restaurant is. So when we're faced with that situation, we have to basically look at what the plain meaning of the word is. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary has defined restaurant as a place where you can buy and eat a meal. Well, with all due respect, I've been there, and I've been there ever since I was about 7 years old. And I've seen people buying meals, and I've seen people sitting there, whether they're sitting at a table or sitting at a bench. People are there and they're eating. So with all due respect, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
You bring up a lot of interesting questions, and I appreciate the information that you've provided us here. I do have a lot of questions, and I do think we have to consider. I think it hinges a lot on what Mr. Cool pointed out, is if we accept the definition of your current use as a pre-existing non-conforming use. I'm not sure we're prepared to do that yet, and I'm certainly in agreement with a lot of people. I think that there are so many regulations concerning an actual definition of restaurant, in this case not a Webster's dictionary definition, but a definition by the health boards and by licensing boards in the Commonwealth that regarding food distribution, none of which really are here currently. That mostly what I see on the one hand here is almost a request to produce a restaurant that would comply with whatever the town determined was necessary. And certainly under those conditions, a restaurant would be built to code. It does not exist now. I think it's presumptuous to come to the board and include verbiage which implies that it's a foregone conclusion that there is a restaurant there. I think there's a lot of reasons to question that. I don't have the answer to it myself, but it seems to me that the kind of issues that are brought to light here, in terms of coming to a definition, rely on us going to, on a number of points, to town council and saying what kind of case law exists regarding the presence of a food establishment being interpreted as and operated as, and what kind of requirements are typically required of an organization that calls itself a food establishment, as opposed to a restaurant. And is there enough case law out there that suggests that there's room to interpret that? Mike Sabatini's case, Farm to Table, is a very different case. First of all, because of Chapter 61, right, and because food is grown and served right there. And there was an enormous amount of case law that we uncovered when we looked at that case that supported his request. I love the Todd Farm. It's been a great institution. It frequently gets fabulous reviews about one of the best places in the whole Boston area to go. I don't think any one of us want to jeopardize the activities of Todd Farm. But you're asking to, our letters demonstrate that our other boards are very concerned about a whole range of issues. I think Ken Ward's comment, I think you're misreading him. I think he's saying, no, the restaurant use is which is not protected. The flea market is certainly protected and always would be. There's enough evidence in my mind to suggest that the occasional preparation of food that became a regular preparation of food as a courtesy to patrons of the flea market was a nice function, but could never be interpreted as what you and I consider a restaurant when we walk into a Spuds, when we walk into the Bradford Tavern. That's a restaurant to me. I go to flea markets, probably we all do, all over the state. I don't interpret them as restaurants, even if there's all kinds of food vendors, whether they're sitting by a fryer or sitting, in a truck. I don't interpret that as a restaurant. There's all kinds of things. So I'm really troubled by the ability to, at what you've given us, which is extensive, of being able to say, well, is this a pre-existing use? I think Mr. Kluge's point is right on. If you're going to ask us to expand an existing use, if that's what your request is, then I'm going to ask town council to say, is this an existing use? Number one. If it's not, if you're saying, no, I'm going to change use, well, you can't put a restaurant in the outlying district. I mean, you can't do that. And we'd have to go against our bylaws to do that. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. The other thing I noticed, and maybe this was the other question, the licensing that you've submitted to suggest that it's a demonstrated previous use. There are a lot of gaps in the years where licensing occurred, and a common victuals license was issued in 1974. It lasted for a few years, and then licensing stopped. And then after that time, a common victuals license was never issued again. It was a permit as a food establishment. So there's a terminology difference there, and that's where I'd like town council to see that difference and say, what's your interpretation of that? What does that really mean? What is a food establishment? Ken Ward's letter says it's a snack bar. The Board of Health, by their current licensing, it's of January 2018, says it's a snack bar. That's not what you're calling it, but that's what they're calling it. I don't know what to call it. It doesn't seem to me like it's a restaurant, but I would want minimally that kind of clarification. If we found sufficient feedback from town council that justified that this is an interpretation as an existing restaurant use, well, then maybe, you're subject to putting a restaurant in place there. But I think, if you're saying, well, we just want to have a few people and we'll have some outside caterers, well, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. is a fairly large window to have just a few caterers come in at a point in time. So there'll be all kinds of issues and contingencies that would have to be looked at very closely, and certainly not only our board would be involved. So those give me a lot of caution. And it has nothing to do with all of the excellent detail that you've provided. It's somewhat of the absence of the detail that puzzles me. And I don't know where we can go from here without going to town council.
I'd just like to make a comment. A few years ago, the planning board determined that that area should be designated as an antique flea market overlay. All right. Prior to that, it was a non-conforming use. They are now a conforming use because they are a conforming use in the district. A restaurant isn't allowed there. Whether it's upstairs or downstairs or wherever it is. He's got a flea market and he's legal. And if he wants to run a snack bar, he can do that on the days that the flea market is open. But that's it, as far as I can see.
The other thing, if it was a restaurant, you have proof that you paid the meals tax all these years? The restaurant has to pay meal tax. You have to have a record, that's very important.
Right. Are they paying tax for meal tax now?
I would have to ask them.
Yes.
Are they?
Trevor pays his meal tax. Brooke paid his.
Okay.
Are those all separate legal entities?
Mm-hmm.
Not the entity that's on this application?
Well, he was there and he ran the kitchen and he paid the tax because he sold the food.
No, I that's good to hear from his point of view. But as Bob says, we need to understand what it is you really want before we can determine what our answer might be. But those may be separate entities that actually, from a legal perspective, as it relates to this application, it has no bearing on what's going on here. But Mr. Levesque's point is very accurate. You want to call yourself a restaurant for the last 25 years, and you haven't been collecting meals taxes for the last 25 years, I don't think you want the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to know that. Because they'll find out. And if you say, well, this is what my revenue was, they'll go ahead and assess based upon projections, and they'll go backwards, and they'll say, okay, you owe us 6% of, $5 million. Now. So I think it's an element you want to... So I think it's better that those two entities paid their own. It's not related to this application.
Sam's Drive, 12 Kittery Avenue. I think one of the big problems here is that in the zoning, my knowledge, and I think this is correct, is only the term restaurant used. It's not terribly well defined. It's not terribly specific as to what a restaurant is. It is simply a place called a restaurant, which means it's got to serve food. I don't think this snack bar ever mentioned in the zoning, because snack bars are regulated under the restaurant ruling. It's all related to food. My point is that I can understand this whole discussion about food and restaurant. I fully agree that the town lawyer should look at it, because it is a murky thing, and you're not going to get a definition by us arguing about it, because none of us know the true definitions. So I'm certainly in support of the idea that you should talk to the town lawyer, but my point is that is it a restaurant if it's applying all of the mandated requirements by the Board of Health, and it's given some type of certificate saying that it's allowed to operate. I think it is. The question is something, however, that really needs to be looked at by town council.
Thank you.
Mike Kovalchuk, 250 Main Street. You mentioned several letters. You brought up the two letters, one from the building inspector and the other from the Board of Health, I believe. What were the other letters that were written by the town boards, and could we have those read out loud, please?
Okay. Okay, we got a letter from the planning board, submitted from Kirk Baker, the town planner. A carbon copy went to Chris Thompson, who's chairman of the planning board, and the county board. I reviewed the submittal material for the proposed construction of a second-story floor in the existing hay barn intended to support, quote, an existing restaurant use, end of quote. My understanding is that the long-standing use of this property has been a flea market. While the underlying zoning for this property is the outlying zoning district, this property is also subject to the requirements of the flea market antique store overlay district, which permits flea markets with special permit, SPR approval by the planning board. However, the proposed second floor seating for an existing restaurant use does not comport with the overall flea market use, and as I understand it, is not otherwise a permitted use in the outlying district, zoning district. I would also note that the submittal material lacks sufficient information regarding the specifics of the proposed operations. There is no restaurant kitchen depicted on the main level of the proposed seating area. Would the food be prepared at the outdoor grill or carried upstairs? The second floor seating arrangement with dance floor suggesting events, gathering, entertainment component of the restaurant use, which is not otherwise expounded on. Moreover, as with the restaurant, the events/entertainment use implied by the interior layout do not appear to be permitted under the current outlying district zoning, or by any procedure under the flea market overlay district bylaw. If the owner wants to present additional information that would better outline the proposed uses and demonstrate their compatibility with the existing zoning, I am open to doing a follow-up review, such as information on attending a site meeting with the applicant to show firsthand how they conduct operations. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Board of Health. The Health Department has reviewed the provided application and plan. The narrative provided with the application does not make it clear the purpose of the request. The application states an existing restaurant on the site. The existing food permit with proof of records from the 1700s has been as a snack bar, food stand, or retail for a residential kitchen located in another site. The current existing food establishment permit is associated with an auxiliary shed with a sink and limited refrigeration. Adjacent to it is a propane grill under a canopy. The Board of Health records do not show seating indoor or outdoor associated with this food permit. Title 5, 310 CMR 15 requires that restaurants with seating have septic systems designed for 35 gallons per day per seat, with a minimum of 1,000 daily flow. Other types such as fast food have different flows. Additional parameters such as a grease trap in the ground may be required. The septic system for the barn, completed in 2013, is designed for 4,900 square feet of office retail space for a total design flow of 367.5 gallons per day. The site is served by a private well. Potentially any increase in use would require the well be certified as a public water supply by the Department of Environmental Protection or collection by the town water supply. This is from the fire department. The Raleigh Fire Department is in receipt of the application mentioned above the determination finding for a pre-existing restaurant. After reviewing the application, the department cannot comment on this, as we do not have enough information to determine what the operation of the facility will be. Some of the questions that need to be addressed are as follows. What type of eating establishment is proposed? What is the occupancy load of this facility? What will its hours of operation be? Will the facility be open during the hours of operation for the flea market? What will be the width and access roads around the barn? Will there be a change to the parking scheme? If so, how will it impact traffic flow on property? What is the total square feet of the entire building, the proposed second floor? Where is the kitchen facility going to be located in the building? Will the present use of the part of the building as a storefront continue? If so, how does the applicant propose to separate the occupancies? What type of fire protection systems are being proposed? The department will make itself available to the board to discuss any and all comments that the department has on the project. That's from the fire chief. This is from the building inspector. The Ford Farm has been used as an antique and flea market since I arrived in 1989. It was always grandfathered until several years ago when we created an overlay district for part of the outlying district. There is some confusion regarding the use of the property where the barn sits. It is outlined in this overlay district, which is now conforming. The other portion of the property with no structures on it is in the central district, which allows uses through the planning board with a site plan or a special permit. Todd Farm building does not have agricultural exemption, as they have no land in 61A, nor do they grow anything. Finally, they have a food shack to prepare food, as they always had food vendors in the past. This, however, by no means a restaurant, which is not allowed in the outlying district. And this is from the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen reviewed both these applications at the meeting last night and do not have any comments on either of them. That was on the previous case and the Todd case. Do I have any other letters?
Did you read those anything?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
really should have read those first.
I think so.
Mr. Chairman, if we're to refer the matter to town council, I think we have to be careful to make sure that we refer it for a definition for our use. We can't ask town council to do our job and apply the facts to the case. So we've got to be careful not to say, is this a restaurant, but to say, can you provide us with a suitable zoning definition that we can then apply to the facts?
So moved. Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion made, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Shall we continue this till next month?
No, I think we have to.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay.
I'll make a motion, we continue to September 27th.
September 27th.
Is it that next meeting, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
At least she's not on herself.
September 20th.
20th, is that right?
20th.
September 20th. Okay. We made a motion, September 20th, we'll hear a second. Motion's made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. See you on the 20th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's what I'm honestly good. Little people that you don't want to see.
It's a low
Septic guy and his legs delayed. Pushing through conservation and all. Test birds. After that, they'll have a septic. We'll go to Chuck Johnson. Because it's a tricky subject. Just for the downhill side of it.
Gives you an idea of what has to be.
No. Take it any building down.
Not what they got.
An open property. It's an open property.
Well, nice to
Thank
see
you,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Thanks,
Take
Dave.
care. Yeah, we'll see you later.
Good thought.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Close the meeting?
We have to return.
Oh, we have to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
We have to approve the meeting, we have to approve the minutes. We have to approve this.
Approve the minutes of last. Okay, make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.